Hello, I'm Judy Piatkus and I'm here with Srimati. We're having a wonderful conversation about the next few years and what the world is going to be like. And I'm going to ask Srimati about the work that she is doing, which is helping our society. Srimati.
Hi there, Judy.
How would you describe the work you're doing?
Well, the work I'm doing, I'm trained as a coach, so I provide coaching and mentoring for people, but my specialism is to do with finding inner wisdom. I have a background in spiritual wisdom from my Buddhist years, but nowadays I brought all that into my coaching work, and I work with people to help them connect with that sense of inner direction, to answer their own questions, find solutions to their problems. So that could be people wanting to find out about their personal life, their relationships, or their vocation. But it's also many times talking to people who are running their own businesses. I'm particularly interested in what I call conscious entrepreneurship and ways of us working and trading and prospering and creating in a way that's sustainable and conscious and beneficial in a more holistic sense than just purely for profit.
And when people haven't accessed their inner wisdom before in a way that they're aware of, how can they tell when their inner wisdom is advising them?
That's a great question. I was asked that earlier by an interviewer, and my response was, well, how do you know which voice in your head to trust?
Absolutely.
Yes, and I think that's very true, because I think, generally speaking, we haven't been taught how to hear that inner wisdom, and B, whether we can trust it or not. And like anything else, we need to build up a bit of practice and get our confidence. But once we've learned a technique, I've actually created a meditation that specifically shortcuts us straight into our inner wisdom. And it's, even if you're not used to meditating, it's a very relaxing, easy process.
Wow.
And yeah,
that sounds really fascinating. And do men and women find it easy? And do men find it easier to access it? Do women find it easier, or does it not make much of a difference?
I don't think it makes much of a difference. One could describe this as more feminine type wisdom, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not accessible to men. So it is about receptivity, it is about opening up to our more feminine side.
Right.
But obviously that's equally accessible to men. Having said that, perhaps men are more trained out of being receptive to that inner voice than women are, so perhaps there's a bigger barrier to overcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think often men are more in touch with their left brain logical side.
Yes.
Women are often more comfortable with their right brain side.
Yes.
But at the same time, we can't generalise about either of them.
Very true.
And how can you tell when the voice of inner wisdom is giving you
good advice? What I do is I check with my body, because when we are aligned with something authentic, when we're aligned with something truthful and good and wholesome, generally there's a feeling of relaxation and expansion in our very body. We can feel it. That's why we call it gut instinct.
Right.
When we're getting some guidance that is actually not good, we can tell, because it feels there's just more dissonance and distress in the kind of physical signal that we're getting. The Buddha taught this. My background was in Buddhism, and the Buddha taught, well, how do you know if something is a good teaching or a bad teaching? And he answered very simply, as he usually did: if it leads to expansion, if it leads to freedom, if it leads to release, it's a good teaching. If it leads to contraction, if it leads to, closing down, it's a bad teaching. So it's a very, very quick rule of thumb. And as I was saying, like anything, like exercising any muscle, one needs to develop a little bit of skill and sensitivity, but it doesn't take very long, and very soon. And then of course there's the matter of just trying it out. So we might just need to test out our hunches and our intuitions and our inner guidance, and then we get the evidence straight back. And you know, try little things first.
Yes.
And then we get more and more confident, and that's been my experience as I've gone through my life. I really feel like I live quite a magical life now. Things get created and I follow my intuition. The biggest hurdle for me is actually remembering to ask my intuition what I should I go into this shop or not. Or if I get so busy and in my head and blah, 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 I forget to even check in. So I think it's having that awareness, that pause, just to ask, and then, you know, being quiet enough to hear, and then we can act. And that's why it's good to have it in the context of a wee meditation, because that just gives you that pause, and then from there, you know where you're going.